When I was in school, I remember that I used to already have some kind of an entrepreneur mindset. I was very determined to earn my own income. So when I was about 15, 16, I used to go out and do part-time work. So I remember my first part-time job was a beauty fragrance advisor for a company called Lux Asia. And I was doing the sales of this new perfume that entered Malaysia called Paloma Picasso. And at that time, I think I was 16, and I enrolled myself in this company, Lux Asia, and I said, I want to be a beauty advisor. And they said, okay, there's a promotion coming. So you can actually go and do the sales promotion at Metro Jaya. At that time was somewhere in town. I think it was in Bukit Bintang. So I took on the job, and that was my very first sales job. It was a 1-week promotion, and I came out as the top salesperson for that Paloma Picasso brand. And that was the first time I ever earned my own income. And that was the first empowerment I would say that was when I really felt empowered to say, wow, I could actually do this, when I believed that, and that it was a step that nobody has given me advice to whether I would make it or not. It was just something that I wanted to do. I wanted to get out. I wanted to step out of my comfort zone of just going for holidays during the school holidays. I wanted to work, and I wanted to experience the working world and having the empowerment of saying, okay, what does it feel like when I earn my own income? So that was the beginning part of, I think, my entrepreneurship mindset that started developing. So then, throughout the last few years of my school, I also did things that usually, no other of my student mates or no other of my classmates would do. I had this idea of organizing fashion shows and getting all my schoolmates, those who are interested, to be the models. And I was organizing catwalk modeling in cafes or in certain places, like, those days we call Piccadilly. It was like an afternoon tea house, right? Party place. So those would be the places that I'll be organizing events, and I'll be organizing fashion shows. So then I would go out and look for hairstylists to sponsor, makeup artists, clothes wear. And I was only 16 at that time, 16, 17. And I would just pop into any of these shops. Like I remember going to Bernard and Co. It was a hairstylist, and I just walked in and said, hi, I'm Jennifer, and I'm here to ask you if you could sponsor a fashion show that I'd like to do. And they would say yes. And then I would go to boutiques, and they would say yes. And then I would round up some girls and say, come, let's do a fashion show, and go and look for a venue and get them to sponsor, and they would say yes. And that was again another empowerment, and I felt that, look, I can actually go into organizing things and organizing events and exploring and experimenting this field. And everything was just, at that time, I felt it was easy, not because things were late for me, but because I had the determination, I had the courage, I had, the belief that if I want to do something, I would do it. There's a will, there's a way. So this kind of mindset started developing in me at 16, 17. Of course, I didn't realize it at that time. But now, when I think about it and say, wow, I actually already started having that kind of mindset. And people will ask me, where did all this mindset come from? And I really can't tell. Maybe it was the people that I mixed with. Maybe it was the movies that I was watching. Maybe it was the company that I was mixing with. And then, of course, I became more mature in my thinking. And I wanted to step out of the comfort zone of what, a 15-year-old or 16-year-old would be doing during school holidays, is just to enjoy. So I would often see my schoolmates coming to the makeup counter or the fragrance counter and say, oh, hi, Jennifer, you're working again and we're having a holiday. And I would be like, yeah, I'm working and I like it. So I think that sort of sets me apart and threw me into the entrepreneur journey a lot faster and a lot younger. So I did that. But then again, Vincent, I actually have a dream. When I was in school, maybe I was in primary school, and I've always had a dream that I wanted to be a lawyer. Not any kind of lawyer, criminal lawyer, and in New York. It was a real childhood dream that I had. And I started watching this movie last time. It was called LA Law. And I would not miss an episode, and my dad would know, my late father would know that that's her time, that's her movie, that's her LA Law movie. So we're not going to disturb her. She watches it. And I watches it really diligently, every episode. And it was a real childhood dream that I said, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a criminal lawyer, and I want to live in New York. So that was what I really wanted to do. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough money for me to pursue law and for me to really take it on far. And I wish it was the kind of time that it was today, that I would say it's okay. If we didn't have enough money to study, I would still go to New York. I would still take law, and I would work to pay for my own studies. But in those times, you're talking about, oh my God, what year was that? 1989, yeah. 1989 was when I graduated, or when I finished SPM. Those were the times that you don't get to do things like what you would do today, right? You wouldn't pack your bags and say, okay, mom and dad, bye, I'm going off. I'm going to New York and I'm going to study and I'm going to pay for my studies, don't worry about it. So it was, and I was quite stubborn then, in a sense that I would say, well, if I can't do law, I'm not going to do anything else, right? So I remember my parents enrolling me into college after SPM. And I decided and said, okay, I'll try to go into college and see if I could really pursue the dream of studying law. So I remember enrolling myself into Sunway College. And I did like 3 months of college, and I decided to not pursue it because at that time, it was already known that there was not going to be enough money for me to study, because my sister was studying at that time, and my sister is a year older to me, so she had to pursue what she wanted to pursue first, and I was fine with it. And I said, fine, okay, no law, no study. So what I did was I then quietly applied for an air stewardess airline position with SIA. So it came out in the papers, I saw it, and I said, okay, I'm going to apply for it. So I quietly applied for the position of SIA stewardess, and then I went for interviews. I didn't tell anybody. I went for the first interview, I went for the second interview, and then I was supposed to go for the third interview in Singapore. So remember I said I was working and I had money, and I was selling, so I had money in the bank account. So I took the money, I had my passport, and I quietly took a train to Singapore and attended the interview in Singapore with Singapore Airlines. Then after the interview, I came back to Malaysia, and then there was a telegram sent to me. I still have the telegram. I still have the, how they send letters through the postman. And I still have that. And then it said, dear Jennifer, you have been accepted as a stewardess with Singapore Airlines, and you are supposed to report duty and this date and stuff like that. So then with that letter, I was picking up my courage and finding that right time to speak to my parents, to tell them that, look, I'm going to Singapore and I'm joining the airlines. I did that. Of course, my mom flipped, like, how did you even go to Singapore for an interview without telling us, right? And, why are you going to Singapore? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And my dad, on the other hand, was like, well, you can't stop her. That's what she wants to do. Then let her do it, right? And at that point, it was like, well, I wanted to do law, but there's no possibility for me to do law. And I want to explore, I want to experiment, I want to explore the world. I want to go out, I want to go to a different country. And this is something that I like, because I like traveling, and of course, being in the airlines would give me that opportunity. So I did that. So I packed up, and I remembered I had about 6,000 to 7,000 ringgit in my bank account. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? 6,000 to 7,000 ringgit is a lot of money back then in 1990. So I took all that money. I told my parents, okay, I'm leaving and I'm going to Singapore, and you do not have to give me any more money anymore. So from that time, when I started working, I already didn't take any money from my parents. I didn't need them to give me allowance. So when I left for Singapore was the last time I ever took any money from them. And I built my life, and I told myself that's going to be the day that I will build my own financial stability, and I will not have to rely on my parents. So that was the beginning of my own journey of independence when I left for Singapore. So then went to Singapore, joined the airlines, and after about 2 years, I decided to leave the airline. I love the job. And again, now I look back, right, Vincent, I look back from now and I look back and I said, oh, why am I in the hospitality business? I have been in the hospitality business for almost 30 years. Why am I in this business? How do I get myself into this business? And then I look back and said, what was I doing before? I was doing selling of perfumes and selling of cosmetics. It was always about customer service. It was always about facing customers. It was about sales. And then I joined the airlines and I really enjoyed it. I loved, really doing the service part, servicing the passengers in business class, in economy class, and always making sure that taking care of them, making sure that everyone's happy. And that was me. That's my DNA. And that tells me why I'm into this business. So it was a very good job, but there were these things that I didn't agree to. Like, I guess it was against my culture, my values, that I wasn't happy in the way things were like at that point in Singapore Airlines at that time. And I decided to make my move and said, okay, so made my decision and said, okay, I'm leaving the airlines, but I'm living in Singapore. I'm going to continue living in Singapore. Again, I didn't tell my parents that I quit. So one day I just rang home and I spoke to my dad and I said, Dad, I quit. And he said, what? And I said, yeah, I quit the airlines. And said, when did you quit the airlines? I said, I already quit the airlines. And they said, why did you quit the airlines, right? So I told him a little bit about why I quit the airlines. And then he says, okay, so when are you coming home? I said, I'm not coming home. I'm going to live in Singapore. And I already had my PR, so I was given, a permanent resident. And I said, I'm going to continue living in Singapore and I'll find a job, right? And he said, how are you going to do it? I said, I'll find a job. So I left the airlines without getting a job. And then I decided and looked at the newspaper. I was flipping to the newspaper. And then I was asking myself, so what is it that I really love? What is it that I really want to do? At that time, how old was I? Gosh, 1992. I was born in I was 20, yeah. So I was 20 years old in Singapore, left the airlines, wondering what I'm going to do, flipping through the newspaper, and really looking at what's my next move, where am I going? And I found a job in Citibank. So Citibank, they had a position for receptionist. So, but it wasn't just any of the Citibank branch. It was in what they call the international personal banking. So it's like the premium banking for international clients. So I joined as a receptionist. So that was my first ground job as a receptionist of Citibank. And from there, I then was promoted to move into the admin side. Then I was doing the administration. I was assisting the managers in doing the customer service with the clients, mainly from Indonesia. We had a lot of Indonesian clients, a lot of Singaporean and Indonesian clients. So I was doing that. And then my bosses then said, oh, we really love the way that you handle things. We love the way that you work. We love your commitment. We like to send you for a course, so a banking course. Because I only had the SPM background, right? So they said, send you there, but you'll be bonded with Citibank. It was the greatest opportunity that I could have in life, or anyone could have in life, because they wanted to groom me to go into bank, to be a banker. They wanted to groom me to particularly look after the Indonesian customers. The thing is, this is why I think, again, come back to the reflection of today and why I am in coaching, why I'm into training, why I feel is so important for people to have coaches and mentors in life. Because if I had a mentor then, if I had a coach or mentor at that time who can advise me in looking at my future, in looking at what possibilities that I could have in life and things like that, I would have taken up that offer. I would have taken up the offer from my bosses in Citibank and pursue that and get into banking, because with the SPM certificate, it can only get me that far. But with the belief that people have in me, and the fact that they can see potential in me, and they can see my future, they can see so many possibilities for me. And in order to support me to get to where they see my potential is, I needed to go through this, right? I needed to make sure I go for banking courses or diplomas or degrees or whatever it is, and do that so that I can then function and operate as a banker with the right qualification. But when you're young, sometimes you can't see the future or the potential in yourself that people see in you. So I couldn't see that at that time. So I told my boss and said, look, I'm only an SPM graduate. And just watching and listening to my own language today, or what I used to say when I was 20, that's like 30 over years ago. And now it tells me why it took me so long to get to where I am today, because of the language I use on myself. Like I would say things like, I'm only a SPM holder. I can't do this, I can't do that. There's a lot of limitations that I was throwing onto myself. I'm not good enough. I don't think I can, be a banker. And even though my bosses were going on and saying, no, I had two lovely female bosses. They were so supportive. They loved what I did. We worked very well, and they were very supportive and said, no, you can do this, Jennifer, you can. Just go for the courses, and you just need to be bonded with Citibank, and we'll continue to send you to more courses, and you can then go to Indonesia and look after the Indonesian market. Can you imagine that kind of potential that if I had taken into my life, and being able to be a banker, being able to be, looking at international personal banking area, being able to be in charge of the Indonesian market. Can you imagine what my life will be today? Not that I'm not happy with where I am today, but I'm just looking at all these possibilities. So, I tendered in my resignation once, I took it back, and then I said, okay, let me try it again. And then I said, no, this is not for me. I was so sure banking was not for me. So again, I threw in my second letter, and then they decided to accept it, because it's like, okay, fine, it's the second time. So where are you going? And at that time I thought, I don't know, maybe into education, maybe into fashion, I have no idea. So at that point, I wasn't sure what I wanted, I wasn't sure where I was heading, I was just looking. There was no clarity, there was no answers. I was just basically rolling like a snowball, just hoping to catch on something that I really like. So I left, and then I was just going on to different areas and different sectors, experiencing different things. And then I landed up in a fashion industry. And again, I was the receptionist, so I went back again I was a receptionist then with a company called Loro Piana. And Loro Piana is an international Italian textile company, very, very upmarket. And because I was Malaysian, I could speak Malay, they started sending me to Jakarta to manage all their fashion shows. And I was like, oh my God, wasn't that what I was doing when I was in school, right? So I said, oh, it's okay, it's easy. So handling fashion shows were easy. Indonesian market was fine because I speak Malay and I could learn. So then, even though I was the receptionist, but I was always given a bigger role, more than just answering phone calls. And imagine at that time, I was, 21. I was doing trips to Indonesia on my own, I was traveling on my own, I was going for meetings on my own, I was organizing these fashion shows, everything on my own. Nobody followed me, it was just me, representing Loro Piana. And doing that was really opened up my eyes and gave me a lot of experience. I was doing translations for them, because all the news came in Malay. I had to sit down and translate everything into English for my bosses because they were Italians. It was kind of like, it may have been just a role of a receptionist when I applied for it, but the opportunities that came with that role were more than just receptionist. And because I was a goal-getter, I guess. I was a goal-getter. I was a person that never thought that, fine, I did have my limitations in terms of saying what I cannot do. Like I cannot be I cannot be a banker, or I cannot be a lawyer, I cannot be this, because I didn't study it, I'm not built for it. But when it comes to things that I have to do, like, okay, Jen, pack your bags, you're gonna go to Jakarta, you're gonna go for the meetings, and you're gonna organize the whole exhibition. Like, who's gonna come with me? Who's gonna guide me? Like, nobody. You're just gonna go figure it out on your own. And that was like the Singapore training that I had. And those kind of things, I would have no issue doing. I would just say, fine, give it to me. I'll go figure it out. So these kind of like I don't know, you call it the courage, you call it the determination, you call it the adventure side of me, right? Those were my DNAs that really gave me the ability to do all that, right? So did all that. I think it was about a year and a half, really, okay, was something again, and said, okay, now move on. So then I did a little bit of bits and pieces, I was in insurance, there's just so many little things to try. And then I landed up in an advertising job. So then there was an advertisement by this company, a very big company back then. It's called Pearl & Dean in Singapore. They are the big boys for billboard advertising. So they're very good in airport billboards, MRT billboards, and street like Orchard Road billboards. All those were all handled by them. So I joined the most difficult division, which was airport billboards. So selling billboards at the airport requires a very different type of sales skills. It's not like the ones that is on MRT trains or on the Orchard Road street. So I took that part, and again, I was trained, and my boss at that time, was saying, look, you have what it takes. You've got sales skills. And then I thought, I was selling when I was 16. I was selling perfume, but selling perfume and selling billboards are two separate things. And billboard ads in airports are meant for corporate companies. So I needed to then start to visit corporate companies, right, to pitch for sales. So then I did that. And it was, again, very, 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 it was a great experience, because it was an experience that took me to corporate fields and start to talk to corporate companies and experiencing sales in that part. So I did that. And then when my boss left, I left. So, but then I thought advertising was quite a cool thing, it was something that I really liked. So I then said, okay, let's stick to advertising. So what next? Then I went into publishing advertising. So I joined a company called C. Cheney's and Associates, and they were the publisher for, back then, one of the top credit cards, which is American Express. So American Express had a magazine for all the American Express members. So I was then their salesperson to sell advertisement space in the American Express magazine. And I did really, really well. I was, again, one of the top sales, and I did so well. I was earning so much money. Back then I was, 22, around that, 21, 22. I was still around that age. And I was already earning it's like 10,000 Sing dollars. Well, that's a lot of money back then. And, so I could really support myself financially, and I was, doing pretty well in Singapore and all those stuff. And from there, then I just went and then went on to another company, but also in publishing, and that's when I started going into hospitality. So my hospitality and retail experience started in a magazine that was in hospitality. So that was how my first step of my foot into the hospitality world, right? So did the advertising then, and then when I was about, gosh, what year was that? 1993, 94. In 1994, I decided to come back to Malaysia, right? At that time, I spent about 5-6 years in Singapore, and my dad was saying, okay, are you not coming back? So I said, okay, I think it's time to come back. So at that time, I was with my partner, my fiance at that time in Singapore, and we decided to come back home. I decided to come back home. So he said, okay, let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to Malaysia. But the thing is, coming back to Malaysia was something new to me, because I've never, being a Malaysian at that time, I've never worked in Malaysia. So I don't know what work life is, I don't know what companies I should be joining, and what we'll be doing. So then my fiance at that time and I spoke, and we said, okay, why don't we start a business? So we said, what business? And we said, what are we doing right now? We're both in advertising, or we're both in publishing advertising, right? So why don't we start publishing business over here in Malaysia? So then in 1994, in November, we decided and said, okay, why don't we do that? So that was when my late husband, we got married after we came back, and Stevens and I, that was when in November we decided to start our own company, our own publishing company. At that time it was called E&O Media Asia, because it was Ernest and Ong Media Asia. And that was the time when we launched our first magazine, which was Hospitality Asia, and Retail World Asia followed with that. And then with all the other magazines that came along the way, we were in Travel Magazine, Fitness Magazine, Men's Magazine, Motor Racing Magazine, Women's Magazine, and we were just doing so many magazines at that time, from 1994 onwards. So that was the journey of my first entrepreneurship in business. Hi, I'm Jennifer Ong, and this is my story.